Namaste Starlights. Welcome and thank you for joining me for another video today. My name is Camilla and I am a human. I am a licensed professional counselor and I am a certified spiritual coach. So as always, please join me to take 3 deep breaths before we dive into today's video and today's topic. So here we go. As always, Starlight, thank you for joining me in that breathing exercise. And secondly, of course, setting today's intention for the video. And so the topic of today is going to be about home. What does home mean? What does it look like? And what does the search for home look like? And so I hope that for you, Starlight, you find what home means to you. So this topic came to me specifically because I am planning on moving soon. I will still be staying in the same state. I live in America, by the way. I'll still be living in the same state. I live in Virginia, but I'm moving to a different area of the state. And it got me reflecting on the moves that I've had throughout my lifetime. And when I went and documented everything down, I came up with 9 moves in total throughout my life. So the first 4 were because my parents were in the military. Both of them were enlisted. And so if you're a military child or part of the military yourself, right, you know you have to move for deployments and different assignments. So I was born overseas in Germany, and then my family and I moved to Washington State when I was about maybe 2 years old, not exactly sure, but around that age, so pretty young. And then I was in Washington for a few years. And then I moved to Colorado probably when I was about 6, 7-ish. Once again, timeline kind of fuzzy there. And so stayed in Colorado for about 4 or 5-ish years. And then moved from Colorado to Alaska when I was 10 years old. That was a particularly hard move for me. I did have some trauma because of that move, which I could talk about at another time. But moved to Alaska at 10 years old, and then I moved to Virginia after that when I was about 14, so 8th grade-ish. And so that was the last military move, because after that my parents retired. And so the moves after that were on me, and I made these moves because I was trying to look for something. But before getting into that, so I went to high school and undergrad college in Virginia. I did move to a different part of the state after I graduated with a friend, and then I moved to Washington State. So I moved back to Washington State when I was about 24, and I lived there for a short amount of time. It wasn't even a full year. And then in 2015, I landed in Texas, living with one of my parents for a while. And so that was, once again, 10 or so months, not, I would think, a full year. And I wasn't happy in Texas. So I decided to move back to Virginia because I had an opportunity to live with some friends at the time. And, you know, it was the kind of the universe calling me back there. So I did that. Once again, I was about 26. And then I realized, well, I want to go to graduate school. And so my list of graduate school choices was quite interesting. I had interesting criteria, but I ended up getting accepted to a graduate program in Colorado, specifically Colorado Springs, where I used to live as a kid. So I went back to Colorado. So you can see kind of a pattern here. I've lived in some of the same states a few times. And so I graduated from my graduate program in 2020. What a interesting time to graduate. And then I decided to move back to Virginia. So I moved back to Virginia, or I've moved to Virginia technically 3 times, 2 times on my own choice. I moved back to Washington and Colorado, 1 time of my own choice. So I've kind of been all over the place, and yeah, it just gets me thinking about my mentality behind those decisions to move. And part of it, and I may have disclosed in an earlier video, but I have complex trauma, or CPTSD. And with complex trauma, there can come kind of the feeling or desire of a sense of belonging somewhere, right? And so when I grew up, I mean, military moving, I think, was hard on me as a kid. I kind of wanted to be the person that stayed established in one place. I kind of think about how when I was growing up and I was switching places in schools, and other people would talk about how they had friends that they've known since like elementary school, right? And they got to grow up with the same people. And I never got to experience that, and I feel like I was always missing something. However, at the same time, I felt like it was hard for me to appreciate the experiences I had. But, you know, I try and give myself compassion for that because I was young and I was a kid, and it was hard to move and just kind of have to restart your life and not knowing anyone. And I used to be a very open, extroverted child, and then I turned shy and reserved. And I think that was the result of the trauma, specifically regarding the move to Alaska from Colorado. And so after that, something in me wasn't the same. It was like a switch kind of flipped. And I kept trying to search for what felt like home. And so what did that mean, right? To me, home meant a place where I felt like I belonged, where I felt like I was wanted by people, and where my environment supported my needs and my desires, right? So once again, the first move I made on my own was from Virginia to Washington State. Now that was a messy move. You know, partly because of it was due to a romantic relationship. I know. And so closing the gap with this person. But I also thought, oh, Washington State is going to be home, right? You know, I wanted somewhere that like had certain cultures I was looking for, and I thought Washington State was it. And come to find out it wasn't, right? So then I moved to Texas, which wasn't really my own choice. The romantic relationship ended, and so I had to move back in with one of my parents. And during that time, I just remember struggling with the feeling of I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be somewhere else. And then I was like, oh no, like, okay, Washington didn't work out. I don't want to be here in Texas. I miss Virginia. So I had done everything to get away from Virginia, hence ending up in Washington State. And I suddenly considered that to be my home. I was like, no, like that was the place the entire time, right? And so then when I got in touch with some old friends from college, from undergrad, and found out they were moving back to Virginia, we talked about it and ended up living together, and I was able to move back. Then when I was there were some more situations that made me unhappy, and I also at the time was thinking about going back to school. So I've always wanted to be a therapist since I was like in my teens, right? And I had been out of undergrad for about 2 years at that point, and I decided it was time to go back. So in my research, I once again kind of looked at places where I thought, you know, like maybe this could be the place for me. Ironically, I was looking at Washington and Colorado. Also Virginia. So I applied to these schools in these 3 kind of vastly different states. Well, Colorado and Washington, right, could be kind of similar in the mountains and things like that. And I ended up once again getting accepted into a graduate program in Colorado Springs. And it kind of came full circle because I used to live in Colorado Springs when I was little. And that was the last time I remember that I felt like home. And I thought to myself, I was like, I want to feel like home again. That I have to go back. And so I did. And I love Colorado. It is a beautiful state, and there's, you know, fun things to do, and just like accessible like things near me. But I went through trauma in graduate school, and I once again was finding myself in a place where I was like, I don't think this is home either. And so after much thought and decision and coming back to visit Virginia, I decided to move back to Virginia after graduate school. And it's like I couldn't sit down. It's like I couldn't sit my butt down for longer than like a minute and, you know, decide, okay, I'm gonna stay here for a little bit. My brain kept pulling me towards trying to find that sense of home. And I think it is connected to my CPTSD, right? Because when we have trauma, we can feel disconnected, right? And it's hard to sometimes establish an identity for ourselves, and it can be fragmented. And so I feel like that's what it was for me. I desperately desired a place just to feel like me. And so I moved back to Virginia, and I've been here now since 2020. And as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am looking to move, however, is in the state. Once again, I'm not looking to move out of state. I don't think anytime soon. But once again, it kind of gives you a lot to reflect on. And so, what is home? For people, it can mean different things. For a lot of people, home could be a place, whether it's like a childhood house that we grew up in. It could be a city. It could be a state. It could be an entire country. However, I think for me, home is internal, or rather it has to be. I've moved so much. Well, I won't say a lot, because I'm sure there's people who have moved more than I have. But the motivation behind my moves was just trying to meet that sense of longing for home, or like kind of fill in a hole that I thought was missing in myself. And I love Virginia, and I love being here. I mean, I've moved back here enough that, you know, as terms of physical places, it's probably the closest to home. but I've realized that home isn't necessarily a place. Home is what you build inside yourself. And I realized that I need to build that foundation inside me and build up the walls and build the roof inside of me and create that home. And so I've been working on that for the past couple of years or so, working on, processing the trauma and working on my spiritual path and spiritual journey. And last year, almost a year now, I went to Bali on a spiritual retreat, and it was life-changing. And there was one of the people on the retreat, and one day I was sitting with the other people and we were having kind of a discussion about what home meant. And one of them said that when they moved to the country they're living in now, it immediately felt like home. And for some people that is it. For some people you can just be somewhere and just feel it. Another person said that their home was internal. And this person, they travel around the world. They have been traveling around the world. And when you kind of pack up and go, obviously you're not established necessarily in one place. But that stuck out to me. It stuck out to me as someone with my history, right? Who was moving around trying to find exactly what home was. And I recognize that now home is probably never going to be a place for me. I don't know if I'll ever live in a place and feel 100% confident that this feels like home. And so, as mentioned, I'm working on building that home inside myself. Because when you have that, home can't be taken away from you. But once again, home means different things to different people. I think if you have a trauma history like I do, and like I was doing, if you find yourself moving around a lot or desiring to move around a lot, ask yourself where it's coming from. Is it a legitimate reason to move, right? Whether it's, you are, for example, living in a red state and need to or want to move to a blue state for better access to certain things, or for safety reasons, or to being near with friends or family. Or are you moving because you're trying to fill in a hole, right? Are you moving because you feel unsettled? And kind of ponder that a little bit. But I realized that for me, I gotta work on my house. So that's my story, and I appreciate always, Starlight, for you listening. And so I would love to hear, what is your relationship with home? Is it a physical place? Is it the people around you? Or is it internal? The thing to be aware of is that places and people can be temporary. And not that it's a bad thing to associate people and places with your home. But remembering that you also need to have a home in yourself that can stand against the hurricanes, that can stand against any storm that may weather, right? So leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. And as always, Starlight, I will see you next time.